10 seconds left. Tajay pivots. The freshman Jackson. Here's Stevens. Step back. He did it again. With 3.4, Colorado State leads by 1.
You have got to be kidding me. This guy is in the zone.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to Basketball in the Mountains. This is episode 9, an emergency episode, somewhat an emergency episode. After Colorado State wins the Mountain West tournament to steal a bid to the NCAA tournament, their third trip to the NCAA tournament in the last 4 years, back-to-back trips to the tournament. As always, I am your host, Tyler King. Thanks everybody for listening or watching on YouTube, wherever you're viewing this podcast. I really appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or subscribe to my YouTube channel to never miss an episode. Leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think. Like, rate, review. All of that is super helpful to the podcast and super appreciated by me personally. So without further ado, it is Selection Sunday, everyone. One of the best days of the year, one of the best days on the sports calendar. I would argue that the first 2 days of the tournament, which would be Thursday and Friday, are my two favorite days on the sports calendar, just with the chaos and all the upsets and everything that goes on. It's nonstop basketball from noon Eastern to well after midnight on the East Coast. So, but here on this podcast, we talk about the teams in the Mountain Time Zone, and the highlight of the teams that are going dancing in 2025 is the CSU Rams, who I cover heavily. Was not out there in Las Vegas for the Mountain West tournament, but was watching from home. I will be traveling to see where wherever the Rams go this week. Hopefully it's in Denver. That would make my life a whole lot easier. But if they're not in Denver, I will be traveling, whether it's Milwaukee, Wichita, Seattle, Cleveland, any of their first round sites. I will be there covering this Rams team, who have won 10 in a row now, including a 69-56 victory over Boise State in the Mountain West Championship game. It's the Rams' first Mountain West Tournament championship since 2003. Just a historic performance the last 4 or 5 weeks, honestly, for the Rams, and especially in Vegas. Very, very happy for those guys, the program. Those guys all deserve it. Really, really great people there with Niko Medved, Ali Farouk-Mamesh, all the coaching staff, the players as well. I'll get into all of that. Just quick programming note at the top here, because this is Sunday morning, recording this a little after 10 a.m. here in the Mountain Time Zone. We have less than 6 hours now until Selection Sunday. So later tonight, I will be breaking down the bracket selection, where the Rams are headed, where BYU's headed, where Arizona is headed, where Utah State's headed, where Utah Valley, they lost to Grand Canyon, where Grand Canyon's headed. All of the teams in the Mountain Time Zone that we that are in the dance, and I'll talk about the 8 teams that are coming to Denver as well, if CSU is, or Arizona or is not one of them. But I'll highlight those as well, and I'll have a special guest on to do all of that. But I wanted to talk mostly or exclusively about CSU in this quick little emergency solo episode on the feed, because that game last night by CSU certainly deserved it. I said last week, both on my podcast and on Justin Michael's podcast, the DNVR Rams show, that I felt like whoever the biggest star in Vegas was, and there are plenty of stars in this Mountain West Conference capable of taking over in a given weekend in a tournament-style setting like that, I felt like whoever the biggest star was, that team was going to win the tournament. And I was right. It was Nique Clifford. You just kind of look at the performances he had throughout the week in Vegas. 25 points and 14 rebounds against Nevada. 26 points and 11 rebounds and 6 assists against Utah State. And last night, 24 points and 6 rebounds against Boise State. Just an epic performance. And it's an epic season for Nique Clifford, who I've talked about this a couple times on this podcast about how impressed I am with Nique. He's a guy who I've seen go from little used offensive player at Colorado to now a superstar in college basketball. And I think if the last 2 months were weighted more heavily than anything else, he would be an All-American. And if he played maybe not in the Mountain Time Zone, he'd be an All-American. But that's just the unfortunate reality of how these things work. It's just tough for mid-majors, and especially mid-majors in a conference like the Mountain West, to get All-American recognition. I know David Roddy did a couple of years ago, I think as an honorable mention. I think that was in 2022. But Nique Clifford is certainly deserving of that. I think he's the only CSU player into having a single season, 500 points, 300 rebounds, and over 100 assists in the same season. So just a special, special season. And Niko Medved said this after the game last night. He is an all-time Rams player, despite playing the first 3 years of his career in Boulder and now spending the last 2 in Fort Collins. This season is an all-timer for the Rams, and it's not over yet. Like this, I'll talk about this a little bit too. The Rams are a team no one wants to play next weekend, whether they're an 11 seed, a 12 seed. I've seen both. Whoever it is, a 5 or a 6, is not going to want to see this Rams team next week. Like I said, they've won 10 in a row. A lot of these games in convincing fashion. You look at that Utah State semifinal game, they got up by as many as 28, really took their foot off the gas. Utah State hits a couple threes. CSU misses a bunch of free throws. And the Aggies are able to cut the deficit to, I think they got it to as low as 6, if I remember correctly, very, very late on Friday night. I can imagine if you weren't watching, because that was a late game that tipped off well after 10 o'clock here in the Mountain Time Zone. But CSU hung on. They were beating the brakes off the Aggies. It was always going to be a slog against Nevada in the opener, just kind of with the way those two teams have played each other historically. But the Rams hung on. And last night, they got up by as many as 25 as well in the second half. Boise State ends up making it a 13-point game with a 7-0 run in the final 2 minutes. With, like I said, the CSU was well aware of what they had accomplished, and we're soaking it all in at the end, as they should have, because this is a special group, and you just kind of look at where they were a couple months ago, 5-5. I think they were in the low 200s or high 200s, I guess you would say, in net in the net rankings in early December, after a pretty rough start to non-conference play. But this was all expected by Medved and the coaching staff. He told me, everybody else before the season, everybody that covers this team regularly, he thought there were going to be some bumps in the roads to start the year, but he felt like this group had the talent to be playing its best basketball in March, and boy, was he right. It's not just Nique Clifford either. Like, I obviously he's the star, and you need stars this time of year, especially to be a threat in March, and that's why I do think the Rams are a legit threat to make the Sweet 16. I don't think that's unreasonable with how they're playing right now. They might as well just be the hottest team in the country. Florida and the SEC is certainly up there with how they've played. BYU was really hot until they ran into Houston in the Big 12 tournament semifinals, which I don't envy that on anyone. But CSU, like I said many times now, winners of 10 in a row. And they've got the depth that you need too, and experience. Jalen Lake is going to be the first player in Rams program history to play in an NCAA tournament game in 3 separate seasons. He's going to be the first player to do that when he takes the court on Thursday or Friday. Kyan Evans only had 3 points yesterday in the title game, but played a huge role against Utah State. Big-time performance, knocked down a bunch of big threes. He was named to the all-conference, or the Mountain West tournament, all-tournament team, which he was certainly deserving of. I've talked about his rise as a sophomore. He's certainly looking like a future star in the Mountain West Conference, and maybe the next guy for CSU once Nique Clifford graduates and heads to the NBA after this season. But we get guys like Jalen Crocker-Johnson, capable of scoring the post, hitting threes. Rashawn Bemba is a really gifted post scorer as well. Good feet, good hands. Just a fun player to watch as well when they're giving him the ball. Like I said about Jalen Lake, just a really reliable shooter. Struggled the other night. I think that was against Nevada. Yeah, but had a really big night in building the lead against Utah State. Hit a bunch of threes. And then you look at like seniors that are coming off the bench. 5th-year guys, Bowen Bourne, who had a huge game last night, 3 of 4 from 3. He played a huge role in helping CSU overcome a slow start and then build a lead pretty quickly in that first half. Same thing goes for Ethan Morton. Career high, 11 points. This guy played at Purdue for 4 years, was a starter in his junior season for almost that whole season. A guy who was just a certified bucket getter in my home state of Pennsylvania as a high school player. Decorated high school career in the state of Pennsylvania, but it's kind of been more limited to a role player role in college at Purdue and now at CSU. But he had 11 points on 4 of 5 field goals, hit a couple free throws, 4 rebounds. He's a really good athlete, a great defender. He's been super valuable to the CSU team, especially during this winning streak, coming off the bench, being kind of like the sixth starter, I would say. Like his versatility at playing the 4 is really useful, especially if either Crocker Johnson or Bemba gets in foul trouble. He's just a super impactful player, and he'll be a huge asset for the Rams this week in the NCAA tournament as a guy who's got arguably more NCAA tournament experience than anybody. This is a guy that was in the Final Four a year ago with Purdue, in the national championship game with Purdue. And then another guy I wanted to shout out was Nique Clifford, who I wasn't sure if he was going to play a ton this season, but he has certainly become a really reliable bench big for CSU, and his physicality down there is impactful. I think he's only a sophomore. Like, I really do think they've got a really good core of young bigs to build around alongside Kyan Evans and some of the young guys that are redshirting this year and the freshmen they've got coming in next year. Like, the Rams, despite not having Nique Clifford anymore for this year, are still set up pretty well. And a guy like Nique Clifford, a Serbian native who played at Long Island University last year and didn't really play a ton. The Rams just kind of found him in the transfer portal and have turned him into a player you're not afraid to put in the game at this time of year, which says a lot for a young guy in his development over the course of one season. But yeah, I like that. Like I said, the CSU is a team no one wants to play this week. We'll find out later this afternoon, tonight, where they will be headed. Like I said, I hope it is Denver. That would be ideal for your boy and not having to travel, considering I was already planning on covering the tournament here in Denver if none of the teams I cover made it. But it should be a fascinating tournament. I feel like still got a couple games left today as I speak. The SEC championship game hasn't started yet. Same for the Big Ten later today. So we'll get the full field after those games wrap up this afternoon. Selection Sunday show starts at 4 p.m. Mountain Time on CBS. I'll be really interested to see who the Rams match up with. There's plenty of teams I could see them taken down in the first round, maybe even the second round to get to the Sweet 16. Like I said, you look at Joe Lunardi's ESPN projections right now. He does have them staying in Denver, so thank you, Joe, for that. And he has the Rams as a 12 seed against Clemson in the first round, and that would be a really fascinating game with Arizona and High Point as the 4-13 game, also in that little pod in Denver. Looking at Jerry Palm on CBS, I think he has the Rams as an 11 seed going to Milwaukee to play Louisville, a 6 seed, with former Ram John Tonje at Wisconsin as the 3 seed playing Lipscomb in the other game in that little quad. So both those would be fascinating and really intriguing matchups narrative-wise, and I think would set up nicely for the Rams too. Like, I don't really know. Just looking at a lot of the projected 5 seeds, and 6 seeds, whoever it is, like Arizona, Ole Miss, some of these other teams, like I mentioned, Clemson, Oregon, Marquette, Purdue. Like, I don't. There are a lot of really, really good teams at the top. Like, I would not want to be an 8 or 9 seed this season and having to play a 1 seed in the second round, because all these 1 seeds are just brutal to play against. Like, they are legit juggernauts. Whether it's Duke, we'll see if they get Cooper Flagg back, but Auburn, Florida. I don't think Tennessee will get there to the 1 line, but Houston and all these teams are so good, and you do not want to play them, especially on that first weekend when everybody's still pretty fresh, relatively, at this point of the year. But so I think the Rams are going to be in a good spot as likely a 5 or an 11 or 12 seed playing a 5 or a 6 seed. And I'll be back later today later tonight. We'll see exactly what time I get recorded. I'll have it up for sure by Monday morning to talk about where all the teams in the Mountain Time Zone are headed. Like I said, we got CSU, Arizona is going to be in the dance, BYU is going to be in the dance. Grand Canyon won the WAC again last night. They beat Utah Valley. So just trying to look here and see projected teams, see if there's anybody else we're going to have to talk about. I don't think so. So that'll probably do it for and Utah State, of course. I forgot to mention Utah State. And Boise is the other one I forgot. We'll see. They're first team out by a couple different of the major bracket projections right now, but they could sneak their way in and get to Dayton for a second straight year where they were last year. That would be a fourth straight NCAA tournament for Boise and Leon Rice. A pretty nice accomplishment. I do think they're deserving of being in. But as we saw last year, the Mountain West had two teams go to Dayton last year with Boise and CSU. Looks like San Diego State is likely probably headed to Dayton. So that'll be interesting as well. But Mountain West projected to get 4 teams in right now. Like I said, could get to 5 if Boise sneaks in. But if they do, I think there are almost certainly 2 teams heading to Dayton with both San Diego State and Boise. And then, like I mentioned as well, we'll talk about all the teams coming to Denver because it is going to be a fun weekend at Ball Arena with 8 teams being here. Going to be a jam-packed weekend of action. It was really fun covering that 2 years ago here at Ball Arena when none of my local teams were playing in the NCAA tournament. Like I said, if CSU, wherever CSU is, that's where I'll be this week. Excited to cover this run and pick back up because I've enjoyed covering them down the stretch here. They're a really good group of guys, like I said, and they're a dangerous team. One of the hottest teams, probably the hottest team in the country right now, and they're going to be a popular pick in brackets, I think, across America for to go farther than they have in recent years. So thanks everybody for watching or listening wherever you're tuning in. I really appreciate it for this emergency-ish episode as the Rams are Mountain West tournament champions, officially dancing. I didn't mention this, but I earlier, but I meant to. I do not think they would have made it in if they lost to Boise State last night. So that's why I keep saying they stole a bid. I do think that might have been essentially an elimination game between the Rams and the Broncos last night, which is unfortunate because I do think both deserve to make it regardless. But I don't think the Rams would have snuck in as an at-large if they didn't win. But they did, so nobody has to worry about that. And they're going dancing, and I'll be there to document it all. Hopefully, like I said, I'll have another show later tonight, Sunday, or you probably listen to it on Monday morning, and then we'll preview whoever CSU is playing later this week and talk a little bit more maybe about the teams in Denver as well and the teams that we cover on this podcast, who they've got matchup-wise. And we'll see just kind of what special guests we can get on the show because this is the best time of the year. Like I said, March Madness is here, and I've been keeping my eyes on the NBA with the Nuggets. Yikes with that loss to the Wizards last night, by the way. But keep my eye on that, and we will dive right back into the NBA as soon as college basketball is over. But soak this up, enjoy this. This is a great, great, great time of year, and I certainly will enjoy everything that's going on the next couple of weeks, and I hope you do as well. So thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.